Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Paul Finck, the Maverick Millionaire, and this is Mavericks Do It Different podcast. This is where we think different, be different, do different. We talk about what's different in our world to create a new society, a new world for all. And today I've got a special treat for you and a special guest. Nick Lowery is with me here now. This guy, you do not know who he is. You are in for a treat because you absolutely should. Hall of Famer athlete, Ivy League scholar, three-time presidential aide, author, poet, teacher, philanthropist, Wall Street stock draft champion. Is just amazing in all regards. Nick, it's such a pleasure to have you here.
Hey, Paul, and I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night.
Oh, now we've said it all. Now we've said it all. Yes, your just journey of excellence has been world renowned. You are absolutely in the Hall of Fame now with the Chiefs, and as just an amazing excellence in as a kicker and one of the greatest records in the NFL. What makes you so amazing? How did you make this happen?
Well, I'd start off by one thing that I try to do as a graduate of the professional sports course in, narcissism, which is what athletes can be addicted to and vulnerable to, is as we get out of the game, realizing that a lot of those relationships were relationships of convenience. Some of them were wonderful. Almost everything in my pro career was fantastic, taught me a lot. But also saying that as we surrender the appetites of our ego as we get older to the eternal appetites of your spirit, your soul, what are the things that are going to fill you up? And to me, as I hear you describe your podcast, I think that's really what it's about, right? Is to find the things that you really care about, that you're really gifted to do, to struggle with, to wrestle with, until you're clear, this is what my gift is, and also allowing space to take it to that other level, which requires resilience, persistence, sticking with it, so that God's gifts, the way we are in our DNA, in our biochemistry, in our brain, and suffused in all our cells, we are rewarded when we are aligned and we do the work. There is the deepest kind of joy. It is irreplaceable. It is like as good as kicking a game-winning field goal is, and let me tell you, that is a great feeling. As good as being in the locker room, being interviewed, saying, how do you do it? As good as being the best at what I did. I'm so proud of that. But to me, I look at it differently. I apply the idea that those were skills on how you go about life to be good at anything, and then to shift that anything to be things that make a contribution. And when that contribution is not just your skills, but how your skills help others, which is exactly what you're doing on this show, to help everyone feel powerful in their own unique way, not to use the brick in the wall thing. We're not bricks. We are not robots. So much messaging today, Paul, is taking away, whether we look at education, whether we look at the stories that are not being told. And of course, we learned with COVID, what amount of information can we sift through and still think for ourselves, no matter how much pressure there is on us and pervasive information. We have to learn to think for ourselves. So that's part of that journey, to be more independent, more creative, and yet more loving too, in the midst of a lot of minefields out there. And by the way, with AI, we can talk about that. By the way, I'd like to talk about that. With AI, it's going to be happening so quickly. It's going to be faster than the human soul and brain can handle, we have to have ourselves so deeply rooted in deep core values of integrity, of love, of empathy. If we're not, we are going to be ripped apart in major storms over the next 10 years because AI is going to take over huge parts of our lives. So there's my soliloquy to start off.
So many things to unpack. The core of this is to find our principles and values and to stay grounded. And I hear that. And then you talked about the persistent, consistent behavior of and what I can imagine, although you didn't say this, I'd like to delve deeper, is work ethic and doing the hard things on a daily basis that creates the greatness of our world, and the understanding that when you go out and sweat and putting your sweat and effort and you come back aching is some of the greatest days you'll ever have. And so much of our teachings in our society these days are to avoid that.
To avoid the hard work. And by the way, it's a lot easier to avoid hard work if you're not doing something you love, that you're passionate about. So, absolutely, we have got to be, hopefully come up with, maybe over this podcast, Paul, you and I can come up with another word. I mean, resilience is a big part. Working with the company I work with called Copa Health, we did a Zoom with Tim Story, who you know, and Lee Steinberg, about resilience in mental health. By the way, if we're resilient in mental health, even if we're not mentally ill, that keeps us mentally healthy. It's not just for people that are not mentally healthy. So to me, we have to do that work to come up with a phrase where it's not work. It is a mission. It is a vision. It is a knowing intuitively that we're doing what we are meant to be doing in our lives. And that is so beautiful. Then, we can calmly, I'm not calm right now, but we can, in a way, I'm coming from a calm place, which is, we're doing exactly, we're on the track we were meant to be. And it's not a non-creative track. It's a very creative track. It is open to all the challenges and all the good stuff as well.
I talk about purposeful intentionality, being purposeful in everything that we do, intentional with everything that we do. And that means everything on a day-to-day basis. The biggest question that comes up is how do we, and again, we can brainstorm on this together, which is one of the great things about hanging out with just great, successful people that have gone through the test of time, is that this is what we do, is we get creative in our next endeavors. How do we teach people what that looks like? What does intentionality in their day-to-day, purposeful intentionality, or living their purpose on a daily, what does that look like? How do they, they're wandering around in the dark. How do they start going towards that light and saying, oh, I know I'm going towards the light. I know what that looks like now. And this is what my action is daily. What does that look like?
Okay, this is not, you're using intention, so I'll use the word secret. This is not a secret. When you ask that question, two things come to me right off the bat. Number one, every single thing we do has a consequence.
Yes.
Everything. It's okay to be intentionally not doing something as long as you're intentional about it. Saying, this is my time when I have to not be scheduled so I can recover. I can let my brain wallow and meditate and marinate in all the feelings that are going on in my life and come up with a rejuvenated way to move on to the next stage of the day.
Which is still intention.
So that's still intention.
Yes.
But coming from the awareness that everything we do has consequences. Number two, this. I see it with you and all that you've been through with your wife and her health and being supportive and yet trying to keep moving. It's got to be so hard. It's gratitude.
Yeah.
Being intentional about gratitude, because there will be days when and months and events where we feel like, at least temporarily, because we're in charge of how long we let that linger, we have been betrayed, we've been misled, we've been, all those things that happen in life as we go through the unending process of figuring out who we can trust, who is good for us, who's not quite so good for us. That's important. That's what I call soulfish versus selfish.
So
soulfish is when it's building our soul. And so we also get trapped when we're being intentional and being hardworking. People might say, oh, you're so focused, you're selfish, you never think about anybody else. But if it's building our soul and our purpose, then we'll have more to give in that process to everyone else in our lives.
Yeah, no question. How this whole concept of that work ethic and putting forth and intentionality, how do you know you're going in the right direction?
Well, part of that law of intention or law of attraction is there will be God winks, there will be coincidences, but there will absolutely be an increase in one's intuition. I don't know if I've met anyone that as they're getting older and they're thinking about, that phrase, getting old as a bitch. I'm sorry, I had to use the word, I'm being real, but actually getting old is also pretty awesome because the intuition is facilitated. So we know that there's a knowing that's so far beyond words of the energy of the other people we're with, the outcome of the interaction, the synergy between us. So those things really matter as we pay attention. And, that doesn't mean getting caught in the I'm better than the other person. It's simply I am being integrous. I am being aligned with who I am so that I can be the most effective and bring part of that is the gift of love and allowing the other person to be who they are. Kind of hard to be so free giving with others and non-judgmental if we haven't done our own work. It's always about we got to take care of our own stuff, and we always have lots of stuff to work on, but that's part of being a human being.
Yeah, no question. Talked about trust earlier and the trust factor. We will have to clean up ourselves to then engage in others. What we put out there, we get back. How do you like the concept of do we trust implicitly and then get proven right or wrong? Or do we have to discern prior to trusting? And that whole equation, what's your philosophy on that?
Well, the old Reagan nuclear phrase, trust but verify.
Sure.
I would say it's trust, but stay aware. Yeah. Trust, but stay aware. Don't say, I've decided that you're great and you'll always be great. No, you're trusting that they're going to show you who they are. As you are, by the way, have an obligation to show them who you are. Yes. But it's also not requiring you to stop thinking about and taking in the information that presents itself. Some people are very good, all of you watching, as you know, some people are very good at presenting an image that looks and sounds and smells and feels so great, but it's really ultimately watching words and actions consistently played out in many different environments over a period of time. And some people you get that right away. So that's where the knowing is. Some people you just get it right away. I got that right away with Tim's story. Yes. I always felt a great chemistry with our friend Craig Duswalt.
There you go.
My friend James Barber, for those of you that don't know, have you had James on your show yet?
Have not. Coming up.
Well, guys, James Barber, who's been through his stuff too, 9 Broadway shows, The Phantom in Phantom of the Opera for 3 years on Broadway. We just connected. So when your composite radio station, when the soulful broadcaster of who you are and how aligned you are is properly organized and congruent, other people pick up. It's sort of like when you're the old style radios and you're switching from radio to radio and it's not quite there, and then you get right on, and suddenly the music and the bass and the treble and the mid-range are all so clear. And that's what happens the more you do this work, is it becomes really clear who you want to be and who can be and already is on your own universal radio station.
Yeah, so much of what we do, it's about that experience level of trusting our gut, of trusting moving forward, and trust and verify. And so often people get stuck with, they get hurt once and they stop trusting completely. They stop engaging, they stop opening themselves up to that vulnerability. And that's where they get stuck, and they hurt themselves as well as society.
I'd like to just give a shout out actually to one of my oldest friends, Dr. Stephen Solomon, who is my fraternity brother at Dartmouth College, and he is past president of the San Diego Psychological Association. But he's written a book with his professional partner on relationships, and it's called Intimacy After Infidelity.
Oh, wow.
And to your point, it's really hard when you've been betrayed, when you've been cheated on.
Yeah.
But if we can't, the poison we take in the anger, and frustration, and judgment of that other person, judgment meaning we can't see them the same way anymore, not just in an intimate love relationship, but in general. That's the hardest work, maybe of all. It's the hardest tenet of Christianity, right?
Sure.
I mean, turn the other cheek. You kidding me?
Yeah. Forgiving, for understanding that the forgiveness is from within, and you have the power to do that in a heartbeat. It's up to you to decide.
The forgiveness is, we're really having to forgive ourselves for having experienced that and been in that.
Yeah.
And numbing ourselves is not the answer. I do feel one of my gifts, I just feel so blessed with end of life situations. I get emotional talking about it, but at the end of life, have we held on to good stuff? What are we going to be thinking about? And when I was playing for the Chiefs, I would go to the oncology ward at Children's Hospital every Wednesday. And I love putting yourself in that position of sort of affirming that life is short, that others have it worse than you, particularly children. One of the children wanted to be buried in my jersey. Can you imagine what that's like? I mean, it's I guess you call it a compliment, but just, man, but if it helps them in the closure, which is a misused word a lot, but in the sense of being at peace, how can you say no? And then another time, a couple called the Chiefs public relations office at Arrowhead Stadium, and Brenda Boatwright, who became Brenda Sneesick, who was community relations director back in the 90s, she came down and said, would you be willing to join a couple? They just had a baby that has a rare birth defect. It's 2.5, 3 days old. And they want you to be with them when they take their baby off life support.
Wow.
And yet, how beautiful that I was given a chance to comfort someone else, right? Man, I got a third story for you, because these are related, which is the situations we're open to, because pain is always there. What do we do with it? If we lose a loved one, I like to say it's God's emotional arithmetic, that the fact that we're feeling pain is because we were loved and we knew they loved us. And who would ever substitute not feeling alive, which means we do open ourselves to pain? Who would substitute numbness for knowing? That's the word again, that knowing that we were loved beautifully and we loved them, they loved us. So here's the third story. And I don't think these are coincidences. I'm walking out of the Westin Crown Center in Kansas City. It's 2 days after the 101 banquet, which is the awards banquet the Chiefs hold every year. It's one of the best football banquets, NFL football banquets in the country. So I'm walking out, I get a call from Georgia David, who was then, this is now 2017, I'm thinking, the community relations person, saying, Betty Johnson, who is one of the greatest fans that she's ever had, who had a front row seat near the 50-yard line, right behind the bench. And I would give her a kiss and a hug either before or after every game. And she said, Betty Johnson is in hospice. She's dying. She's been there for a week. She said goodbye to all of her family. But this is a woman who sold her house and moved in with her daughter so she didn't have to give up her Chiefs season tickets. And she said, would you go by there to comfort her? And I'm like, of course. So I go there with Georgia. She picks me up right away. It was going to be the next day, but one of her daughters said, we don't know how long she's going to have. And I go into the hospice department or location at North Kansas City Hospital, and all of her daughters there, a couple sons, grandsons, granddaughters. They're all wearing Chiefs jerseys and shirts. They have a Chiefs blanket on the bed, and they have a whiteboard behind Betty Johnson. And I bring a hat and I put it on her head and I whisper to her, it's Nick Lowery. Hey, remember, I told her about, several games, and then said, I just, so Len Dawson and Otis Taylor and Christian Okoye and Joe Montana and Derek Thomas. And, remember those great games, and talked to her about a couple of those, just whispering. She was, her eyes were closed, her mouth was slightly open. And I began to write on the whiteboard, here's to Betty, here's to heaven on earth, and in heaven where we're going and where you're going. And then I wrote down, we love you, the names of all of her favorite players, because she'd lost her hearing. So she needed that whiteboard the last few weeks of her life. So put it back up there. And I look across the bed from me, because as you look at the bed, I'm to the left with my hand holding her hand, and her son is across from me. And I said, are you sure she's still here? He goes, oh yeah, she's still here. So I said, well, let's say a prayer. And so we all took hands, and literally at that moment, as we prayed, she let go and she died right then. And I walked out of there with Georgia just crying, but feeling once again so blessed that I could just help give comfort and peace to that person who just, that's what they needed. There's lots of examples of this too, right? That people want to be in a place where they're ready to let go. There have to be certain things that they feel. And I won't talk about finding my mother when she died, but it was also like that. Anyway, how does that relate to living life all the time? Well, to me, it's being open. It's being open, and we're able to be open when we are in that place of knowing, because we've made our life congruent. Our everyday actions are consistent, congruent, and we're doing things we love, but also that help other people too, like you and what you're doing today. And it's me today or next week or whenever this comes on. It'll be other people another time, and we pass that baton, but filling ourselves with this nutritional, spiritual food. It's intellectual, it's emotional, it's also spiritual too. And it feeds all of the energies in our body every day, every second.
Yeah, and it's so interesting, the journey, being able to do this, and for you being able to do and be in the position to be asked to be a part of all that and to be present and do all that, had everything to do with what we did, not today, but so many years ago, in stepping into our own purposeful intent and stepping into this journey in living the life that built us to be the people that we can be giving and be available and be in that position today. Started so many years ago. And it's something that I encourage so many people to do, is to recognize that in your journey of life, the more you open yourself up, the more you put out there, the more you work within your own greatness, the more opportunity to exhibit that greatness and to touch the world that'll happen. And in that way, the world gets better and better.
I would substitute magic for greatness so that we stay humble. I love Rafael Nadal's phrase, stay humble and hungry, because that keeps us curious, that keeps us humble to what are the new things we're going to learn. And greatness, when I hear that, I think, that's feeding, I'm great. I know that's not the way you meant it.
Yeah.
But I think we have to, again, be intentional about where that gift is. If it's a gift from God, then it's also the thankfulness as well. And it's also a magic. It's just a beautiful thing. And anyway.
Yeah, I talk about living into your fullest potential, which is what it's about, that we were given the gifts, and it's about utilizing those gifts to the highest and best use to be able to show up with that magic, if you will. And it's a driving force for me every day, is to live within that space.
Yeah. So there is light, and there's laughter, there's music, there's magic. Because without being intentional, we can be rudderless and we can be taken off course. Because life is complex, and we live in it with a lot of other people. And it is, to me, it's that discipline. And the good news is, like any discipline, the more that habit, the more the right habit is in you, the more it feeds off itself and becomes more of a talent, a skill, a polished skill. When we do Champions for the Homeless, which we'll have on June 25th from 9:30 till 1 o'clock Sunday at St. Vincent de Paul shelter in downtown Phoenix, those events are, once again, the intentional events that bring out this empathetic part of us. And I've never seen it more beautifully exemplified than in what it does for the children that come. And I tell them, if they're really young, I just, under 12, I tell them, you got to be with your mother or father nonstop, and vice versa. They have to look after them. We've never had an incident ever. But what's so amazing is these kids get a reference. For the first time, they could see that they were helping bring joy and makes an adult's day a little better. That's real power.
Go through and you jumped into it, and not everyone knows about the great work that you do and about Champions for the Homeless. Tell us a little bit about that so that people can engage with it and know how amazing it is.
Well, my dad was, I found out after he died 13 years ago that he was chief of station for the CIA in London. My mother was in the Women's Royal Navy during World War II and actually questioned Hitler's record keepers. Their lives were about service, quietly serving. And that, being around and growing up next door to a Supreme Court Justice Byron White, who was best friends with the Kennedys, the most famous single line of the Kennedys: ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. So that always resonated with me. And so as I finally made it after being cut and rejected by 8 teams 11 times, that calling was still there. And we started something called Kick with Nick for cerebral palsy. And every time I found myself having an opportunity to do more work in that philanthropic, charitable, altruistic vein, it was always so beautiful what I got back. And helped launch AmeriCorps for President Clinton. If you see that right there, that's a Sports Illustrated article by Peter King, and that's me with Bill Clinton leaning against the Oval Office desk, and that's a letter from President Clinton thanking me, and he just watched me kick 5 field goals on Monday night against the Broncos. We beat them on my points, 15-7, and that next day after the Monday night game was the signing of the AmeriCorps bill. And just quick anecdote. So he's leaving there, and I say, Mr. President, you look great. He's he was thin. This is 1993 and May 25th. And because you remember events like that, we had a bunch of great athletes doing great things in the world. Dan Marino, Joe Theismann, Dave Winfield, Thomas Hearns, even Sinbad the comedian. So those are just some of them. But anyway, so I said, Mr. President, you look great. What have you been doing? He goes, Nick, I've been running sprints on the South Lawn. And I said, Mr. President, I guarantee you're the first president to be running sprints on the South Lawn and very likely the last president to be running sprints on the South Lawn. So those are all precursors. Each one of those were stages, right? Stage versus age. My friend Tim Story talks about that. And so now, 17 years ago, after starting something called Native Vision, which is now in its 27th year, I felt this appetite, and I don't even remember exactly. I think I was just invited to speak at St. Vincent de Paul, and a guy named Jimmy Walker invited me, who founded Fight Night with Muhammad Ali, by the way, who moved in 2 doors down from me 17 years ago. Coincidence? So I just thought maybe I should start something. It started with Christmas, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter. And now we're doing it for the first time this year 3 times in the summer because it's really hot here in the summer. What we do is an extension of everything I've been talking about, which is we look 1,000 homeless folks in the eye like this, with no judgment, with love, embracing, with the message, I see you. It has to be authentic. I hear you. I love you. What's your story? Help them be reminded, refreshing the mind of what really matters. We give away 1,000 flowers. We have anywhere from 200 to 500 volunteers. And we have beautiful food which St. Vincent de Paul provides, and we have some other sponsors for that. We have some of the best musicians in Phoenix, so they get some great music. My friend Laura Thurbin painted 2 murals next to each other, which have pictures of people that have been at 50 of these events we've done over the last 17 years, if not all of them. And it depicts people coming through and being served, and then the children watching us serve these, what I call homeless brothers and sisters, right? And then suddenly the children start to stand up and serve too. So that's a sense of home in the midst of sanctuary, really. And then we have 1,000 pairs of socks, 1,000 pairs of underwear, 1,000 t-shirts, 1,000 backpacks or totes for them to carry stuff they're being given, 1,000 $5 gift certificates to Starbucks or McDonald's, just as an opening sort of business card of love to create just that little bit of trust for somebody that's never met you before, you've never met them. And we tell our volunteers the most important thing you can do is sit down at a table with them and ask them how they're doing and ask their story. And it's amazing for those of you that have not done this. It really is remarkable. Probably 95%, 19 out of 20 that feel, not just see, but feel this pervasive sense of love, right? In the Bible, it's where 2 or more of you come, right? But or 3 of you come. But what if it's 200 and 300 and 400, all this with the same energy? That energy is unbelievably powerful. And I've seen these layers of pain and defense disappear, just completely disappear. Even if it's just temporarily, it's helping them know that light you talked about at the beginning of our interview, where that light comes from. You're helping them know they're not forgotten. And that drives, man, working with American Indians, working with inner city youth, whoever it is, who's not forgotten. Now, my latest thing that I really love is helping the Border Patrol that are just overwhelmed with a 40 to 50% of 50 times increase in number of people that are crossing the border, and they're just overwhelmed and they're trying to do the right thing. So Champions for the Homeless, getting back to that, these kids experience giving. We also have donated clothing. We have, this time we're going to have 6 hair cutters, 2 chiropractors, an acupuncturist, And then we have donated clothing, where we have sort of like you're at Nordstrom's with a personal shopper helping you find your clothing. It's always used up. I mean, it just gets better. We change it a tiny bit, improve it a tiny bit every time, add things every time. And it's been so good to me. But watching these kids, right? Because we're going to be choosing addictions in our lives. We're too behavioral that way. That's why this thing is the devil, the devil himself, and also, hopefully an opportunity to bring spiritual godliness into our lives that can't be taken away. And when kids notice what it feels like to be powerful in that benign way, that sublime way of helping another person feel not forgotten, feel loved, they're addicted for the rest of their lives. So parents out there, if you can give your children as many as you can references to how that feels, they will be changed forever, and they'll be searching for it forever, as opposed to searching for the short-term stuff that we get addicted to because we're so used to, especially with AI, which I mentioned before, that instant gratification, which leads to this kind of life.
Yep. You want to, and I've worked with people that have been going through hard times, people that go through depression, people that have challenges in their life. And one of the first things to do is to go and look to serve others. And as soon as you take yourself and get focused in on the external versus the internal, the direction of all your feelings shifts, and you can really receive the love and experience that fully as you engage with that. And it's such a great lesson from children all the way through to the last days of your life. Make sure that you're experiencing that in some way every day, and watch what happens. Yes.
Well, Paul, you do that every day. I mean, what you've been going through with your wonderful wife,
I appreciate it.
And I see that choice that you make, to put yourself in that place where there's still gratitude and there's still that feeling, that energy you put out, which is, I'm alive.
Yes.
I'm alive. Let's go.
I will say, and we've gone through a battle with cancer with my wife, and we've gone through some amazing components. And one of the things that we celebrate every day now is, whatever the challenges in the day or the things that come up, it's like, hey, you know what? None of that matters. We're alive. Yeah. And to celebrate that and to be grateful of that and to appreciate that every day makes all
Joseph Campbell, sorry to interrupt.
Yep.
Joseph Campbell has an amazing interview with Bill Moyers on public television, but also in a book. He was one of the most revered storytelling professors anywhere. And he was an expert. He wrote a book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And he looks at myths and creation stories of hundreds of civilizations and cultures. And I find that fascinating with my work with American Indians, because the verbal tradition, the oral tradition, and also the initiation ceremonies, the sunrise ceremony with the White Mountain Apache, or with the coming of age ceremonies with the Sioux, which are just brutal. What is that about? What are those initiations into the good stuff? That's what I would say. The initiations into the really good stuff, which is a world where we revere wisdom. We revere the elders that have been there and are helping us remind ourselves before it's too late where the gold of life is, where the diamonds of life is. And I love the work with American Indians. And as I'm watching Bill Moyers ask Joseph Campbell this profound storyteller questions, near the end of it, he says, so this is about the meaning of life, isn't it? It's about helping us understand what life is all about. Yes. And Joseph Campbell said, not really. It's about putting ourselves in places where we feel fully alive. Because if it's about meaning, then we're caught up in our head. But the feeling fully alive is everything. It's head, it's spirit, it's body, it's mind, everything. That's feeling fully alive. That's where every cell, every mitochondrial and energy in each cell, the blood itself, the oxygen in us, which produces spiritual energy, which can allow us to transcend the toughest things. So here's another story. I got to go here in a little bit, but boy, this is a great story. So I look at my life now and go, how on earth did I grow up next door to the Supreme Court Justice Byron White, who led the National Football League in rushing twice in 3 years, who led the NFL in rushing the same year he finished #1 at Yale Law School? I mean, ridiculous. Who commandeered as the head of the marshals before he became a Supreme Court Justice for Bobby Kennedy, who was the Attorney General under John F. Kennedy. Byron White was the head of the U.S. Marshals, and they commandeered the school buses that helped protect the marchers into Selma, Alabama during the civil rights marches. So just remember, we need all of us together to move forward. And the white people like him that helped African Americans take this nation to a better place, we need all of us to work together, right? And so then I say, how on earth 17 years ago did Muhammad Ali move in 2 doors down from me? And Phyllis Wallace, these are the things that happen. I said God winks, right? Things and coincidences that keep happening.
Yep.
Phyllis Wallace, who just called when I held up my phone, that was her calling. She was the first director of my Adult Role Models for Youth program. And 17 years ago, she said, Cleve Walker is coming into town. He was the best man in Muhammad Ali's first marriage. And I'm like, and he's, one of his best friends. I'm like, sure. The next day, knock on my door, the Cheney Estates. I don't live there anymore. Muhammad is gone, of course, now, but it's just 2 miles from where I live now. And he said, I'm Cleve Walker. And Muhammad's sitting in the passenger seat because he had Parkinson's of their white Range Rover. And Cleve said, hey, I'm Phyllis Wallace's friend, Cleve Walker. And why don't you come join? My dad was with me. Why don't you come join us for some tea or coffee, whatever. And by the way, bring cookies. Muhammad loves cookies. So we did. But Muhammad Ali became a dear friend. And I had breakfast with him when he had his Parkinson's. He had moments of real clarity in the early morning. So just that interesting thing. But anyway, I was able to take him to a Los Angeles Dodgers game, preseason game, spring training in Surprise, Arizona, which is clear on the other side of Phoenix. It's more than an hour and 10-minute drive. And Muhammad's Parkinson's drugs only worked for about 4 hours. So we knew we had limited time. So I talked with Dayton Moore, who was the general manager for the Royals when they won the World Series, and we're in the World Series 2 straight years, just a couple of years later. And I truly believe this helped them come together. And here's Muhammad Ali. And I'm driving him there. I also drove him to the NBA All-Star game, which is another story. What that was like, seeing LeBron James and all these famous Yao Ming and all these people acting like little kids. But anyway, we get to the stadium in Surprise, and they had a double-decker golf cart. They gave Muhammad a Royals jersey with #1 and Ali on the back, and we rode out around to the outfield wall, came in. As we came in, it was like a movie. I mean, people recognized him immediately. I'll send you some of these pictures if you want to see them.
Great.
And they're on my Facebook page, everybody. Nick Lowery, Nick the Kick. If you want to look through my Facebook pictures, just scroll down under those albums. But anyway, so we're sitting there, and it's Muhammad Ali next to me, George Brett on the other side of the screen. We're in the front row behind home plate. Pretty cool. And George Brett, one of the greatest pure hitters ever. Amazing. And Wayne Gretzky. So right here, Wayne Gretzky, the great one, and the greatest next to me. I'm like, life is pretty cool. So at the end of the 6th inning, midway through the 7th inning, we had to go because we had to protect Muhammad with his Parkinson's, and he's shaking a little bit, and just knew we had to, have the discipline to leave. So there's a standing ovation. We go out through the outfield wall, and I'm grateful. But as we're coming around the corner, I see there's about 25, 30 people standing next to the white Range Rover that I'm going to be driving Muhammad back with. And I'm like, oh God, it's going to be tough because he's shaking a little bit more, and he's tired. This is going to be tough. And it was mostly children. So it was the children of the coaches and the front office staff for the Royals, and maybe a couple Dodgers too. And as soon as we got within about 40 feet, Mohammed just willed himself. I talk about transcending when it's that spiritual energy. And it just, his shaking stopped. And he sat there, and I have pictures with child after child sitting on his lap, taking photos with this angelic look on his face, giving them that pure love. Because that's when we talked, he was always, love was in the sentence, every other sentence at the very least. So here's a guy who's a Muslim.
Amazing.
Right at the beginning, all the stuff that's going on with racial stuff, with religious stuff, and he didn't care. It was about being the most loving person you could be, not some category, not some stereotype. And here's a man who is the greatest boxer, I believe, of all time, who also made one of the greatest stands of all time with the Vietnam War. And then we all know him holding up the Olympic torch in 1996 in Atlanta. Just a phenomenal human being. But I got to see the power of that spiritual integration where your life is so aligned that you can call it God, call it the God in you and in all of us, to stop cancer, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, whatever it is, and be there for people as he was for the next 25, 30 minutes. Exhausted as he may have been when we got there, that fatigue disappeared. You think that I didn't think of him differently after that? I already revered him, but to see that is the most beautiful part of human beings, right? I want to be like that, right? They say, I want to be like Mike. I want to be like Mohammed that way, right? The ability to love people so much that it would never be about our race, about who we did, what we did with our lives. All those things disappear, fade away. How are you in the moment to be loving and present and present? So that's it, man.
Oh my.
That's
Nick.
what we strive for. And that's why I love my life. I'd love to do this again with you, brother. I've talked a lot. I hope some of it helped, but it's just more and more the right things come into your life. You have to pay attention. Some angels may already have been there, and you just now are able to notice them more and pull them in. They'll pull you in. Just pay attention to that energy and find just a fountain of blessings of cool, great people like Paul Finck to help your life be more aligned, more purposeful, more meaningful, but also, like I said, more than the meaning is feeling fully alive.
Everyone, that is a great place to close out this session. Nick Lowery here. You're absolutely going to come back. We'll talk more about these topics because, to fill the world with love and greatness, and the reason why you're filled with so many great stories and events and people, just the magic of what has happened is because you put out that love and you receive it in so many ways. And that's what our human condition is about. And the more we can experience that and do that in all ways, the better world we have. And thank you so much for being a part of this, being a part of the messaging here and everything that we deliver. And thank you for being a friend. Really
Thank you. For those that want to, we talked about this before the show, but it's very simply Nick Lowery. You can write Nick Lowery Foundation, but that takes longer to type. So nicklowery.com or nicklowery.org, Lowery. There's an E in there. And let me know. I can help you if you want to contribute to Champions for the Homeless. We have a beautiful Chiefs necklace. We can probably make it in if you have another NFL team that you love. But by the way, isn't that great? That's creativity. I designed a necklace, but then it serves a great purpose.
Yes.
Right? So
yeah, absolutely.
Stay creative.
nicklowery.com, nicklowery.org. Absolutely check him out. Go and talk about his foundations. Find him in 100 different ways. Donate. He's doing so many great things and continues to do things and magical things every single day. And just appreciate you so much.
Thanks, brother. I'm going to post. So when you get this, I'm going to post this on Instagram, which is just Nick Lowery 88. I was number 8, and I guess some other Nick Lowery has an 8. Damn it. But anyway, thank you for having me on, and bless you for everything. Please give your wife my best, my love. I had prostate cancer almost 5 years ago. I'm cancer free now, and I was very lucky to get it early. And just so much respect for you, the way you support her, and for her, the character to live her life. I remember her drawing at our mastermind, beautiful drawings, which I know is one of her ways that stimulates that beautiful creative part of her. So thank you for having me, brother.
All great, all amazing. Thank you so much, Nick Lowery. For all of you that are here, thank you so much for being on this journey with us, for sharing. Continue to share, comment, like, review, and get the message out, because that's what we do every day in delivering this love and this passion to the world. Continue to be a part of this community. Thank you so much. Listen to this week's podcast all over again. Go and listen to next week's as well. And this is Paul Finck. This is Mavericks Do It Different podcast. Till next time, everyone.
Thanks for being here today. As our gift to you, be sure to go to themaverickuniverse.com, where you can download your free copy of the Maverick Manifesto. Until next time, dare to be different. Dare to be a Maverick.